You can beat 99% of the competition simply by doing these 7 things. These 7 things. That's it. It's simple. It's not necessarily easy, because at the end of the day, never underestimate the power of the basics, because fundamentals executed with excellence is what wins championships. These 7 basics, these 7 fundamentals, if you just do these every single day at the highest level that you are capable at, wherever you are right now in your journey of executing them, you will get ahead. I promise. Number 1. You need to show up, regardless of how you feel. Show up. Woody Allen says 80% of success is just showing up. I agree with this. It is remarkable to me how many people allow their emotions, their motivation, their feelings on a day-to-day basis dictate what they do and do not do on that day. It is never ceased to amaze me that there are very high-level people still to this day that do not show up and do the work simply because for whatever reason they didn't want to. And this came like most starkly into focus for me when we started a podcast a number of years ago. We would bring on guests into our podcast, and these were like some fairly successful people. And for whatever reason, when you're scheduling guests onto a podcast, there is a very high likelihood that they are going to cancel at the very last minute. I'm not talking about like a day before. I'm talking like an hour before. You'll get an email out of the blue from somebody being like, "Oh yeah, something came up at the last." You would not. It's like kids on, on the day of midterms. Like guaranteed, somebody's grandma dies, right? Like if I'm a professor in college, I'm like, man, it's a bad week to be a grandma because everybody's grandparents are dying this week, right? I killed off my grandma at least 3 times in college. So like I've used that one. But when it came to the podcast, like we would get guests constantly being like, oh yeah, some family emergency or some other emergency. So it's crazy how many emergencies come up that they suddenly couldn't show up for this thing. Now here's what I know to be true is I know the truth is that they're lying. They're lying to me and they're lying to themselves. And I know this because I have done this. I have been there myself. In the beginning, I would do the same thing. Podcasting gave me so much stress and anxiety going onto somebody else's stage that sometimes I simply couldn't do it. I simply would call them up and I'd say, listen, I got to reschedule. I can't do it today. I was that person. And it wasn't until I stopped being that person that I stopped like breaking the word that I made, the promise that I made to myself and the promise that I made to that other person. And I stopped saying that this is negotiable, that this is an okay thing for me to not follow through on. Once I started treating my word as my bond and saying, if I said I'm going to do something, then there is no chance that I'm not going to do it. I'm going to show up. I might not do it well, but it's better to suck than it is to skip. So do what you said and show up. That's number 1. Show up. Number 2 is do what you said. Step 1, if Woody Allen said 80% of success is showing up, I believe the other 20% is just doing what you said you would, right? You don't have to show up and do the best thing in the world, right? You just have to, don't skip. It's better to suck than it is to skip. But doing what you said is all about actually following through on the activities that you said you would. If you would just become the type of person who always keeps their word, you could literally achieve anything that you want in this life. But there's so many instances where we let ourselves off the hook. We're really lenient bosses when it comes to holding ourselves accountable, that we don't actually do what we said we would. And we don't turn in the report when we said we showed up, but we didn't do the thing that we said we would, right? So these two, that's the yin and the yang. You have to show up and you have to do what you said. Number 3 is that you have to solve actual problems, not the symptoms of the problem. One of my favorite examples of this, and I kid you not, this did happen, is back in the day at Escape Climbing, I get a call one day from my graphic designer who walked into the bathroom and he's like, yeah, a pipe burst and there's water all over the floor. And I was like, oh man, okay, what are you doing about that? And he goes, well, right now I'm mopping it up. And he's like on the phone with me mopping it. I'm like, cool. Okay, so have you called a plumber yet? And he's like, no, you're the first person I called. I'm like, I'm not a plumber. Like, what do you want me to do? And I was like, okay, hang up from me and give him a call, and I'll come down to the shop and see what I can do. So he hangs up. He calls the plumber. I go down to the shop, and I walk into the bathroom. He's still in there. He's still mopping. I'm like, cool. Did you get a hold of the plumber? He's like, yeah, the plumber will be here in like 30 minutes or something like that. And I look at him, I'm like, so what are you doing? And he's like, oh, I'm just mopping. I'm like, still? And he's like, well, yeah, I mean, it's still like leaking. I'm like, what are you? I look up, I'm like, what are you talking about, dude? Like, why is the pipe still leaking? He's like, well, I mean, water's still coming through. I'm like, we haven't turned off the water? He's like, I can do that? I was like, yeah, dude. Like, if you have a pipe that's bursting and water is raining onto the floor, the problem isn't water on the floor. The problem is water is coming out of the pipe. The water on the floor is the symptom. The water out of the pipe is the problem. We can solve that by just turning off the water. And he's like, oh, this is so common, and this is a really obvious example of it, right? But like when you're in the crisis mode, you get fixated on what's in front of you. And often what's in front of you is the symptom, not the underlying problem. The ability to correctly discern what is the actual problem that we're trying to solve here and putting your time and energy into that rather than into symptoms, that is what gets you ahead in life, okay? Number 4 is you need to remove constraints, but you have to do it in the right order. Often, the theory of constraints has served me incredibly well in my entrepreneurial journey. It's the ability to discern, okay, where is the constriction? Because a pipe will only put a flow through the system at the rate in which it is constricted the most. Another way of putting that is the chain is only as strong as its weakest link, right? So if you want to put more throughput through a pipe, you need to alleviate its biggest constraint. What we do often, though, is we identify the wrong constraints. And this is, again, going to the problem or the symptom, right? We identify the wrong constraint. We typically identify the constraints that play to our strengths. And so within a business, that might be lead generation, sales, conversion, delivery, or retention, right? Those are really 4 big buckets. If you're a marketer, you tend to look at every problem through the lens of, oh, we need more leads. We need to get more at the top of the funnel, right? If you're a salesperson, you look at it and be like, oh, we need to get more sales. But if you're a salesperson, it's not going to do you any good to increase your sales conversion cycle if you're already great at that, but you're just not getting enough leads, right? Or you have a ton of leads, you have a ton of sales, but your team can't fulfill on it, right? What's the actual constraint in the business? Often we burn out because we're solving the wrong part of the equation. And then as soon as we actually fix the constraint, once we solve for that, we unlock all of this growth pretty much overnight. So that's the secret here, is just to make sure that you're solving for the biggest constraint in the right order. Don't solve it out of order. Otherwise, you're just going to waste your time, your energy. You're going to feel like you're banging your head against a wall because you're like, I don't understand why we're not growing. I'm putting in all this time and effort into this thing and we're still not growing. Well, you're solving the wrong thing. So go solve the right problem. Again, this corollary to step number 3 here. All right, number 5 is you need to learn how to manage your energy, not your time. Time is a silly construct. It doesn't actually exist in any kind of quantitative or qualitative objective measure of reality. Time is subjective, right? Your perception of time is different than mine. Right now, time is flowing very different from me being here delivering this message to you than it is sitting on the other side and being like, I am bored out of my mind listening to Anthony, right? We're having a different subjective experience of time. What is the building block of life is not time. When people say like you only have a little bit of time or time is your most finite or precious of resources, what they're really saying is you have a finite amount of energy. And how you manage that energy, how you deploy it, how you maximize it, how you optimize it, that is the building block of life. And so look at your calendar, look at your schedule, look at the activities that you have in your life and optimize for your energy, not for your time. Once you start looking at everything through the lens of, oh, how am I maximizing, optimizing, and deploying my energy? Everything changes. All right, number 6, focus on being effective, not just busy. The analogy I like to use all the time is don't water fake plants. Like there is no greater waste than to do with excellence that which shouldn't be done at all. There's no sense in watering a fake plant, right? It makes you busy, look like you're doing something productive, but in fact, that plant is not going to grow, no matter how much you water it, right? And so it's a waste of time and energy. And that example makes it very clear and obvious that you shouldn't be doing that. And yet there are countless things in your life, countless things in your business that are the equivalent of a fake plant. You are watering it because you don't realize it's a fake plant, or you have deluded yourself into believing that this is somehow a productive activity. Don't do that. Focus on being effective, not just on being busy. Number 7, this last step, is execute quickly, not perfectly. People who sit around trying to plan everything to perfection before they take action, before they have all the information, all the resources to be able to do the thing perfectly, they never end up going anywhere, right? One is better than none. And that is what you must always keep in the forefront of your mind. It is better to move quickly and break things, to do things poorly than to not do them at all. So if you can do these 7 things, if you can show up, if you can do what you say, you can solve the actual problems, you can remove constraints, you can manage your energy, you can become effective, and you can execute quickly, there is nothing you cannot do. And I promise you, you will get ahead of 99% of people. It is that simple. Good luck. Godspeed. I'll see you in the next episode.